So according to internal Defense Department documents, Pentagon is planning to launch a program to screen social media accounts of military personnel for, quote, concerning behavior or extremist material.
Joining us now to discuss these revelations is former National Press Secretary for the Bernie Sanders presidential campaign and contributing editor at Current Affairs and co-host of the Bad Faith podcast, great friend of the show, Briahna Joy Gray. Great to see you, Briahna.
Good to see you, Briahna.
Same here, Crystal.
What did you make of these revelations?
You know, we live in a world where social media platforms are playing an increasing role. And historically, America has held itself out as a country that was disproportionately, uniquely interested in protecting the privacy rights of its citizens in all of these kind of public-facing contexts. The rise of social media as public forums, as it were, has really drawn a lot of focus in more recent years as to how many freedoms are going to be protected there, because we don't have the same traditional expectations of privacy or the precedent in the form of law to protect our rights to speak there freely the way we do in more traditional public squares, sidewalks, national malls, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so now this move is part of a concerning trend towards surveillance in these spaces that, in essence, are the types that should allow the same kind of free speech protections. And the idea that the government is going to move closer and closer into this path of surveillance, warrantless surveillance without any cause, is a concern.
Yeah, and Briahna, I brought this up because I know that you just talked to Chelsea Manning a little bit about this. What did you learn from that conversation in this context?
We were really, really glad to get her for 3 hours. We released an hour and a half of that two-part interview this past Monday, and we'll release the next half next Monday. But what was so interesting was talking to her about the kind of ethical commitments that made her become one of the most famous whistleblowers of all time. I mean, we all remember the way the video of the Apache helicopter, American helicopter, gunning down civilians really shifted our understanding of what our country was engaging in overseas and the extent to which war crimes were being conducted outside of our awareness. And without the kind of whistleblower protections that would have prevented someone like Chelsea Manning from being sentenced to 35 years in prison, she only served 7. There are so many disincentives for anybody to actually engage in that kind of rather patriotic behavior, much less people in this instance who are just trying to perhaps articulate a support for Palestinian civil rights in a moment like this one on their Facebook without feeling like there was going to be some kind of censorship from the military.
Yeah.
So, Briahna, the pushback would be, look, some members of the military, both current and former, were found to be involved in the January 6th attack at the Capitol. Military is concerned that there are extremist views among their ranks. They're trying to root that out. What would you have them do?
Well, one of the things that you also learned from the Chelsea Manning story is how much, erratic behavior, how much behavior was actually manifesting in real life as opposed to social media, and how there's a lot of, for lack of a better word, a lack of HR or basic, human resources support given to military personnel. So the idea that the observational gap has to leap entirely to social media and surveillance, as opposed to some of these more traditional ways to understand what's going on with individuals, is a pretty significant leap. And I'd also say that part of what goes on, part of the issue in a lot of these instances, is that the parameters for what the military is looking for are really vague and broad. Or generally speaking, when we're talking about social media constraints, what it is that qualifies as, suspicious or inappropriate activity. And what the civil liberties concern is that so often the activities that are ripe for censorship are not activities that actually lead to improper behavior, illegal behavior, the way that 1/6 did. It becomes immediately surveillance of people in categories that I would argue have no business being surveilled. For example, belonging to religious groups like being Muslim. And so without, given the precedence of that being the focus traditionally, and without any more substantial guidance on what actually is going to be surveilled and what kind of behavior is attempting to be curbed, that's where the overwhelming liberty interests come in, and why there's so much skepticism about the military in particular being engaged in this sort of activity.
Yeah, well, and worth pointing out, too, that the government, and by the way, this report is from, of course, our great friend Ken Klippenstein over at The Intercept. The government knows that this is sketchy because they understood they haven't done this in the past because of First Amendment concerns. And so they're looking at using a private surveillance firm to get around the constitutional concerns, as if having a private company spy on you makes it any better. Right. Briahna, always great to have you breaking down these issues. Tell everybody where they can find your interview with Chelsea Manning, both the part that's being released and when is the next piece coming out?
You can hear it at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. The subscription is $5 a month. You can also watch some very lengthy free clips from the episode at our YouTube channel, Bad Faith YouTube. And the second half of the 3-hour interview will be released on Monday.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Go subscribe, everybody. Great to see you, Bri.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Coming up, we'll talk to human rights attorney Stephen Donziger about his trial. That's next.